In today's episode, called Moving Beyond Fixing, Managing, and Controlling Through a Woman's Perspective, we'll talk about things like courage is contagious, teen substance abuse, then and now, not right and wrong. Here are some things for us to ponder. A woman's perspective is unique, different, and always so helpful. No matter what your sexual orientation is, things like fixing, managing, and controlling are personal actions that you and we're always going to have to face and address. At some point in time, we're going to have to do it. Firstly, start by asking yourself, what's the positive in fixing, managing, and controlling? And why do we all at some point in our lives find ourselves doing this? What's the origin of intent when we fix, manage, or control? Is it to make things worse and to harm ourselves and others, or is it actually to make things better and to help? Choose a specific moment in your life when you tried to fix, manage, or control the situation. What are the specific beneficial outcomes you are looking for? And list 2 to 3 if you could. Now, be honest, how did it turn out? How did it really turn out? Now, lastly, turn your focus towards the non-beneficial side of fixing, managing, and controlling. What about engaging with either one or maybe all three had you realize that they are not a solid answer to navigating any situation? How did they affect things like the relational rapport, which is always needed to make a lasting impact? Did connection and trust deepen? Or honestly, did both take a hit? Be honest. Did connection and trust deepen, or did both actually take a hit? Welcome to Weekly Wins and Losses. My name is James Hepner, former real estate entrepreneur turned self-development hacker, coach, and fulfillment strategist. Each week, we bring you a thought to wrestle with that'll help you live fully alive and gain more life. Real life is made up of both wins and losses. Both were designed for your good. That's basic reality. Without facing and learning how to embrace your losses for greater gain, you miss out. You leave 50% of your life experience on the table. So with that, let's begin the show. Listeners, she is a storytelling business coach, a speaker, 7-time published author, and a 2-time podcaster. So she loves to help men and women learn how to heal, own, and share their stories and build profitable online businesses that create a massive income. So just a little, perhaps shedding some light on what your life was like in the past. I'm just going to read out here. I know you sent this my way. But years ago, in the midst of dealing with teen substance abuse, Marsha lost her voice, her drive, and shame and judgment ruled her life. She was consumed with trying to fix, manage, and control others. So this is kind of why I wanted to get into right away. I'm like, there's so much.
There's a lot. There's a lot. I know it can go a lot of different ways, but I'm here for it.
Oh, that's so nice. So I would like to begin by maybe just open up and give people, they don't know you, right? My listeners probably don't know you.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I love your shirt. Courage is contagious. So there you go, listeners. How is that not so true? Courage is is contagious.
So
And
true.
so if you don't mind, would you like to just let us into your life a little bit and just share a little of the backdrop of your life, and so people can understand where you're coming from?
Absolutely. First off, thank you for having me. I love being able to have these conversations because I think that when we share a story and we open up and we give others permission to see what is possible, and where I am today and who I am today and what I get to do today literally came from the worst experience of my life. And so many times we resist all of the things that might be coming our way. And it's hard to see to the other side, but I want to be a light of hope if possible for someone today.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's just, what? I had a plan for my life and my life didn't go according to the plan that I set out, which is literally always, right? We all set this plan, what we think it's going to look like. And years ago, we started to experience teen substance abuse. And there's just I won't go into a lot of the details of it in the sense that all I can say is it like affected,
Mm-hmm.
infected, and impacted
Mm-hmm.
every single aspect of their lives, our lives, and it almost had to all burn down before it could start again. And in that time, I was trying to look for answers and solutions, almost as if there would be one thing that I could do that would fix it, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the mentality. I think, unfortunately, I think as a parent, but I'm going to speak to moms for a second.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that we signed this agreement that when we have kids, it is our job to do everything to fix, manage, control, and make it be smooth for them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
except that that's not our journey. Like
Mm-hmm.
their journey is not our journey. Our journey is to guide them as best as we can, as I say, to allow them to step into adulthood and be the best adult, best version of themselves possible. They're not ours to keep. They're not. And that can be a really hard thing when you're going through something that is really difficult. So I was trying to find answers, and I was trying to look for solutions, trying to keep them safe, myself safe. And then also on the other end, juggling the criticisms, judgments, and
Mm-hmm.
fear, opinions, thoughts of other people, that I just didn't even know where to go. I mean, my past
Mm-hmm.
was, I was in a space where I was replaying every single thing that was going wrong. I was afraid of everything that was coming, and I didn't want to be in the present because the present was not a place that anybody would have chosen to live. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know where to go half the time, and I was in this fight over here trying to get answers, and then this other piece here trying to control everything. So it was just such a bizarre time when I think about it. And I know I spent years in healthcare and working in physical rehab, fitness, health was very high value for me. All of that was gone. I was just literally using every ounce of energy that I could to try and fix what I was living in.
Mm-hmm.
And
The
it,
sign of a very loving, typical mother, right?
yeah, and I think this ultimately really does come down to why I decided to share my story. Obviously, I didn't just leap
Mm-hmm.
into that space, but one of the big things was is that I didn't fit the mold of what people assumed I would look like. Right? We have this assumption that that only happens to those families. Can't tell you how wrong that is. It's
Mm-hmm.
so wrong because I've met so many people along the way. And the more I recognize that I didn't fit that mold, it felt even more important that I did show up and share that that was my story. We didn't have, nothing went wrong. Nothing caused this to happen. I mean, people would say constantly, like, what would you do differently? What is something you think you did wrong to cause this? And it I realize, like, I can see it now, but people ask questions based on their own experience, right? Their own lens.
Mm-hmm.
Our story scared the crap out of everyone. It scared the crap out of everyone because if it could happen to us, it could happen to anyone. And so there had to be a reason, right? As humans, we look for, there has to be a reason why, who is at fault. And it just
Mm-hmm.
makes it easier for us to take in a story if we can blame somebody for it. And there was no one to blame. It was just the way it continued to unfold. And if my life hadn't unfolded in the way that it did, I wouldn't be doing the
Mm-hmm.
work that I'm doing now.
So because of, not in spite of what I'm hearing, because of this is who you become. I know when you interviewed me, I picked that up pretty quickly. It's
Mhm.
you have found a way to truly transform, and to transform requires integration,
Yes, that's a great way to say it. That is a great way to say it.
right? And so, holy smokes, that's just a lot. It's a lot of. I know my wife, she often talks about, and you help me understand when you say that the mother often has this agreement, right? And you said something here, and the listeners, I'm sure you picked up on this, and I wrote this down. Our children are not ours to keep. I remember there's a specific moment when our children were born
Mhm.
that I just remembered how reliant they were on me as a dad and Meg as a mom. Like if we didn't come to the
Of
crib,
course.
they would cry, and they would, they needed, and crying was okay, but they needed us
Mhm.
to come. And so the one day when I went into the bedroom and they were crying, and I picked them up and I rocked them a little bit, and I'll never forget. So Rowan is 17 now and Harrison's 15. And this is our first baby, Rowan, and he was all of a couple of months old. And I was standing by the window, and he felt all comforted that I was holding him. And I thought to myself, you know what's interesting is there will come a point in time, and when is now a good time to decide that though he's mine, he's not actually mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I believe that it's a miracle. I believe a baby, I mean, two humans having a good time in the bedroom, wherever that happens, that
It's a
those little
miracle.
fingers could, it's a miracle,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember just, and at the time, I remember just whispering a little prayer to universe or God, whatever you want to think of. And I just said, I basically give Rowan back to you. And I had to surrender that. It was very
Mm-hmm.
hard for me. And I remember just bawling in the moment. But I remember thinking, you know what, James, you're going to have to make sure you don't set yourself up for learned helpless suffering down the road. Because if you think, which to some degree, you gave him comfort, you gave him stability, you gave him certainty or safety, whatever he needed, you gave him that. The only thing is, and I wonder, so this is now I'm transitioning to the woman role.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering because the baby's inside of you,
Mm-hmm.
court system. Why does the court system typically award the mother the children? It's the nurturer is typically deeper there because perhaps you bore the child. It was in you. It is from your womb, and the child wants to get back into the womb of life. And that's what we as a child wanted, or as a human, we always want to get back to the womb of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk to me from that, if you could, for just a sliver of time from the very womanly perspective, and not is your job harder, but if you hear my story, because my wife was interesting at the time, I told her this, and she looked at me and she smiled. And to some degree, I wonder, and I've never really got from her completely, because I don't know if she's telling me all of what's there, but it seemed to me that she had something inside of her that said, I wonder if you're doing this because I wouldn't want to put words in her mouth, but did you do this for Rowan because you didn't know how you're going to do this? And to some degree, if I observe Meg on the how part,
Mm-hmm.
she just slays it. Like she nails it with the kids. The mother often could do this. But what's happening for her, she's going through a bit of a death now. It's been a couple
Yes.
of years. She's going through a death because she's realizing that the boys need to break away from her
Mm-hmm.
because they're teenagers and they want to. This is healthy, and she's okay with it. Like we have this little thing in our house which says, create a safe space for your kids to rebel in your house. Because if not, they're gonna rebel somewhere else. So create a safe space to rebel here. Let them know that's needed because they don't want to break away, but find things that don't affect you so much, but they feel completely strong about. So if you think about the female, your space
Mm-hmm.
is what's different from the male based on how you could pick up on it. What's different for you as a woman?
I don't know. This is such an interesting question. I don't think I've been asked this before. So I'm just going to lead with my
Mm-hmm.
gut in a sense. I do think that, you carry them. There is definitely a connection there. And I also think that there are some fathers that I know who actually firsthand who did deserve custody of their kids that didn't get them. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a case that it's only the mother that can play that role by any means.
I would agree.
I don't at all. And I also think that, how do I say this? I think that women, and I'm speaking 100% for myself, we micromanage a lot of things at once. We're
Mm,
like trying to, deal with
mm,
what's for dinner, who has to go where,
mm,
who has
mm,
to sign up for what.
mm-hmm,
We're like
mm-hmm,
juggling all
mm-hmm.
of these
True.
things
Yep.
at all times. I'm not saying that that's always a badge of honor because I
Mm,
don't actually
mm,
think it's the best way to go, but it is what a lot of us have done. And then to go with that, we're also subconsciously planning all the what ifs. Like all the what ifs,
mm,
what's
mm,
going to happen
mm-hmm,
if this happens? What happens if this happens?
mm-hmm,
We're like trying to plan ahead of time for all of the things that could go wrong, which we can't do that because, as somebody would say to me over and over, what are you going to do when the shoe drops? And I used to have to prep for mentally what's going to happen when this goes wrong. I
mm-hmm,
had to get to the space of going, well, when that shoe drops, I will pick that shoe up. I can't plan for that shoe to drop. I'll deal with that when it happens. But I
mm,
think as women, we
mm.
also micromanage so much that we're always trying to make sure it's all going to work out best for everybody. And so that's, I think, another factor
Ooh.
that happens. And I actually don't think we're allowing ourselves to bring our best self forward when we stay in that energy, to be completely honest. Because when we are also trying to micromanage everything for everyone else, we're not allowing the natural learning curves
Mm-hmm.
to happen. And people need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
People need to have mistakes. People need to have failures in order to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that for whatever reason, I often equated it to, it was like this unwritten contract that I didn't realize I signed. And it's not that I felt someone imposed it on me. I felt it was mine. It was mine to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, my husband was working. He was driving, he was commuting, he was gone. So again, I went, that's me. Like he
Mm-hmm.
never said that. That was me taking that on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is just also only gets amplified when we're dealing with shame and guilt and judgment and super heavy, low vibrational emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it only gets amplified because we just take that on thinking like, I failed. Like, what else can I do wrong? What else could I do right? How do I fix this? And all of that, like those spirals, I lived in that space for so long.
Mm-hmm.
No solutions are ever going to come from that energy. It's not productive. It's not
Mm-hmm.
productive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. Something that comes to something that I'm just feeling here. It's fascinating when I think about, um, so your t-shirt, courage is contagious.
Mhm.
When I think about courage is contagious, it's like, I think the beautiful thing about the feminine or the woman, I'll say it like this, because there's masculine and feminine in me and there's masculine and
Okay.
feminine in you.
Yep.
Okay. So we all have the nurturer within us. Like the exterior world actually considers it an honor to serve the interior. And the interior is associated more with feminine, exterior is more masculine. The
Mhm.
masculine considers it an honor to serve the interior because everything comes from the inside. Right. So,
Beautiful.
right. And so when I think about courage is contagious, it's like, firstly, what I like to be is just honor you for the place of that you feel like you signed that agreement. That first stage of life, I honor you for that. And here's why. Because it takes courage to sign up for a program that's deeper than what you think you have resource for. It takes courage to do that. And you did. It's just like
Mhm.
my wife, she signed for the same thing.
Mhm.
Here's what I'm hearing. Tell me what you think. So when you say, my job is to make sure things work out for them. Like that was what a kind, loving, caring human would want. Like that's natural. That's
Yeah,
beautiful,
it wasn't coming from a space of like, I
right?
am a control freak that I have to.
No.
I just thought that was my job, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Right?
Mhm.
And that was your job. And who wouldn't, like, the court system, if you want to go court system, would probably remove the children from our care if we didn't have a desire to have things work out well for our kids. Like that's a great thing. The only thing, and I'm wondering what you think on this. What happens when we try to, so first we're saying we're fixing,
Mhm.
then it's like, well, that isn't working. So then we get into managing. Well,
Mhm.
that doesn't work. Then we try to not only, so when fixing the present doesn't work and managing the present doesn't work and controlling the present doesn't work, now we try all of that in the future. We try to fix the future, we try to manage the future and control the future. And what's the possibility that that's going to work at all? Like the future does not lie in our hands. The truth is, our behaviors today will create the future. But if we get involved in anything but the present, we're lost, and not in a helpful way, right? Wouldn't you say?
100%, 100%. Like and that is a lesson that we as humans tend to have to learn the hard way. Like we have to learn, because people say, well, I had to learn how to surrender. And listen,
Mm,
I'm a
mhm,
fighter at the core. Like
mhm,
I didn't realize until I was an
mm,
adult that those were traits that I learned
mm,
because they were about self-preservation. As I was, just different things I dealt with growing up. I was a fighter and it served me really well until it
mhm,
didn't.
mhm,
Like
mhm,
those traits,
mhm,
when you're dealing with a situation like this, those traits were the
mm,
last thing that I needed,
mhm,
because the more I pushed, the more they pushed. The more I pushed, the more they
mm,
pushed. Like it actually just, and I'm not saying that that's my fault. I'm saying that's just, I learned that I had to do things a different way. And so when it comes
mm,
to the point of of choosing surrender, it came from a point, probably the lowest point in my life, but it came from a point. I remember taking my little checklist to my counselors and saying, I've done all of the things you've said. Like, I'm a student, give me a star. I've done all the things you said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a good mom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's all checked off. And they're like, yeah, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not yours to fix anymore. And I'm like, no, you said to do the things on the list. And I've done the things on my list,
Mm-hmm.
but our problems haven't changed. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
they've amplified. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually not yours to solve.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what is a mom supposed to do with that? Like, how do
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to do with that. That's where surrender had to come in, because I just had to recognize my way was not working. It
Mm-hmm.
just was not working. And it's very easy, and I do hear this a lot. It's very easy to look at it on this end of the equation
Mm-hmm.
and say, oh, but it turned out great. I'm like, but when I started to make choices to choose me, to take care of me, to surrender control, I had no idea how this was going to go. I didn't know. There was nobody gave me a blueprint or a map to the future. I had to make those choices at that time.
Oh my goodness. I'm just tracking back in my life when I transitioned from the first half of life to the second half. Transitions can be very difficult because the first half of life, you build most of your certainty, most of what you are doing is coming from a place of I want to know. So we build from answer,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to be big, not small. So we're solving for one end of it. And it isn't it's better now than then, meaning it isn't that was wrong and where we're at now is right, meaning where I'm at now is where I gain strength from both questions and answers, from
Mm-hmm.
both being big and small. Like I like to lay on the grass at night and look at the stars and go, how the freak does that just balance in the air and not hit me on the head? Like that's pretty incredible. Like I like to feel
Yes.
small. But
Yeah.
sometimes when I go for a walk and I step on an anthill, unfortunately I didn't mean to kill them, but I'm glad I'm not small in the moment. Like I survived. So I mean, yeah, I'm solving for self-preservation. Sorry, but to some degree there, I guess I am, right? But
Mm-hmm.
so on the thought on then and now, this moment of transition, liminal space can feel so destabilizing. And I think the human being often forgets that we're actually most alive when we're not in balance. Like when you go for a walk, your right foot goes forward, and when you're out of balance for half a minute. Your body's trying to find balance, but it can't, and that's that mystery and going, can I handle this? And your body goes, sure. Like try to go for a walk and not do it. So listeners, just try this sometime. Go for a walk, but don't be on a mission and a purpose to achieve a certain heartbeat. Just go for a walk. Go at any pace you want. How much
Mm-hmm.
effort does it require? Very little. And actually, it rejuvenates you. What are you doing when you're walking? Well, you're not walking like a kangaroo, unless you do a potato sack walk. You just like two legs. You're not a kangaroo.
Right.
So here's the thing, you're always in a decentered state. And when you're in a decentered state, I wish that somebody would have talked to me about that in that liminal space and season of my life. To not label that as bad, because if I would have just said, I'm feeling totally shaken and my
Mm-hmm.
world is moving, ask yourself, what's living? It's what's moving. And when you're in that sacred space of movement, like you said, when we transition from what worked to now doesn't work, it isn't to say that was wrong and that was horrible and I engaged there. Like, how could I have done that? It's like, no, that just worked then. And now is now. It's not good or bad. It's like that needed to happen so that I can now be here.
Exactly. That, like, everything you just said is so true. And I think it's such a great reminder that for anybody who says, oh no, I struggle with lack of control, or I struggle with letting go. Um, Change is the only constant we have. It's literally the only constant that we have. And that can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. But I think what it comes down to is recognizing that like, we are the piece that is coming to every single part of our life. Like, we are the constant.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so we get to choose how we show up. We get to choose how we respond. We get to choose what we do next. We choose, like, we have way more choice than we think,
mm-hmm,
but we're putting so much of our emphasis and time and energy on choice in the wrong direction. I think we're putting it in
mm-hmm,
trying to control those pieces, trying
mm-hmm,
to manage all of these other things. And at the end of the day, like, we need to take more responsibility for ourselves as we move through this. And I think that, I just, to tie it back to one thing you asked in the beginning, and
mm-hmm,
as a female, I think that when the kids are little, you're right. They need you for every single thing that
mm-hmm.
they're doing. They
They need
do.
you to
Of
they need
course.
you to think for them. They need you to act for
Yeah.
them. Everything.
Everything. So I get that. But then there comes this time Exactly. That, like, everything you just said is so true. And I think it's such a great reminder that for anybody who says, "Oh no, I struggle with lack of control," or "I struggle with letting go," um, change is the only constant we have. It's
Mm,
literally the only constant that we have. And that can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. But I think what it comes down to is recognizing that like, we are the piece that is coming to every single part of our life. Like, we are the constant.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so we get to choose how we show up. We get to
mm,
choose how we respond. We get to choose what we do next. We choose, like, we have way more choice than we think,
mm,
but we're putting so much of our emphasis and time and energy on choice in the wrong direction. I think
mm,
we're putting it in
mm, mhm,
trying to control those pieces, trying
mhm,
to
mm,
manage all of these
mm,
other things.
mm,
And at the end of the day, like, we need to take more responsibility for ourselves as
mm,
we move through this. And I think that, I just, to tie it back to one thing you asked in the beginning, and
mhm,
as a female, I think that when the kids are little, you're right. They need you for every single thing that
mhm.
they're doing. They
They
do.
need you to
Of
they need
course
you to
they do.
think for them. They need you to act for
Yeah.
them. Everything.
Everything. So I get that. But then there comes this time where it's like you have to let them have and learn by mistakes,
Mm,
by
mm,
choices, by, and like, even the small things, right?
mm,
Like,
mm,
even the small things.
mm,
So that's that piece of letting go and letting them learn as they come through. And then you're like, we want them to be self-sufficient adults. Are they
mhm,
going to make
mhm,
mistakes along the way?
mhm,
100%.
mhm,
100% they are.
mhm. Yeah, you know what? There's something, and I'm trying to find this here. Sorry for rifling through. I'm trying to find. There's something that I have in my day, and I read it every day, and I just don't have it right here in front of me. That's okay. But I talk about what is mine to do in this life, and so I created this a couple of years ago. And one of the last things that's written on the thing, I'm going to botch it. My writing, I'm going to botch it. But one of the things that I wrote. So, well, the first thing is to live and to experience, and number two, and then to feel this, and the last point is, and then to drop into what? And this is what I wrote down to some degree, to drop into the life-giving presence of surrender. And here's the thing, what requires surrender is that you would have had to buy into something originally. What did you buy in? What the kid needed. It was
Mhm,
essential. If you don't love the kid will die.
mhm,
So it's
mhm.
like it's a setup. It's a setup. It's a humanity play for like you getting to walk this journey. And it's incredible when you think about it.
It is. It is. It is absolutely incredible. And when I can look at the big picture, I mean, I wouldn't be who I am today without this story. I wouldn't get to do the work
Mm,
that I get to do today. I probably wouldn't have the relationship I have with my kids now. I wouldn't have it with my spouse now. Just, I wouldn't, because
mm,
we everything had to blow up to start over.
mhm.
And that's the space of it. It's just, don't hold on thinking
Oh,
you wanted control of how it's going to look, because you don't know. You don't know.
so here's to the play. It's interesting you say blow up. So listeners, try this on, and some of you listeners will know this about me already, but I'm a ferocious person on just utilizing the seasons of life and just observing it. So here's the thing. First half of life, typically we construct our life. We construct, we construct, we construct. We want to like land the house, land the job, land the woman, land the man, land the kids, the healthy ones, whatever this is. We want all the surprises that we like, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
constructing your life. Then what happens is this happens at every stage of life and everything you do. There's an invitation for when all of a sudden things just aren't adding up, and how you once got to your place of feeling good and life's great, it's like it's kind of empty. So what once worked doesn't work anymore. It's like it's moving.
Mm-hmm.
Hallelujah. It's alive. It's moving. And so what happens is the opposite of construct is deconstruct. So people go, whoa, if you deconstruct though, because sometimes what happens, you get a little angry during that time. Why did I believe that? And it's like you're choosing good over bad. And it's like it's the invitation to move to the next stage, which if you're smart, you gotta be careful. But if you're patient and you do the work, you'll go through, you'll let the anger you feel, let it just prime you to take proper action for the next thing. And the
Mm-hmm.
next thing isn't to say that was horrible back then, but it's to do both and. It's like that was then, this is now. So including both. Transcendence by inclusion is true transcendence. You can transcend by excluding, but if you do, when you're in the deconstruction stage, which we all are in everything in life, if any, anything alive goes through these cycles: construction, deconstruction, reconstruction. Reconstruction makes room for all of it. But if we do the unwise thing, I'll just say it like this: when we're in deconstruction, going, listen, this doesn't make sense. We're asking questions. We have doubt, and by the way, doubt creates faith, because if you don't have doubt, you don't have faith.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing: if you don't like that place of liminal space, like what's going on, meaning that blow up, what you said, it blows up. It's like, I'm putting it all together, and now it blows up. The only thing is, life is, you put together, and then you pull apart, and then you put together, and you pull apart. This is the flow. And so if you do the unwise, you're going to go back to construction, which is to say, this is too difficult. The ground is too shaky. There's too many moving things. I need to put my feet in cemented ground and say there's life found when nothing is moving. Now, I don't want to laugh, because it's very hard to go through deconstruction, because, and again, I wish somebody would have been there with me to just be like, this is helpful. You're feeling shaky. That's making you stronger. It's priming you to ask yourself, do you want to transcend by including, which is moving towards reconstruction, you're moving along, or do you want to go backwards, which is you're transcending through exclusion? So the truth is, people can transcend by excluding, but their worldview will be small. They're not going to benefit many people. They're not going to really have a great life experience. So when I think of all of this, something that comes to the surface for me, earlier we talked about fix, manage, and control. And when I think about it, I think tell me what you think. I think the first thing we try to do with fix, manage, and control, we try to do that in our present. But when it doesn't work in our present, then we go, well, I must do it out there. And so moving beyond present is playing with fantasy. Is it true? Because you're just playing with what we might, or what do you think about this? I think we first trying to fix, manage, control our present. But when it doesn't work, we go, where else can I? Well, I'm going to future pace this. Watch this. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's a powerful question. I think we do future pace it. And I think like we future pace it, which means we're literally creating anxiety in our life, because I can't control any of that, right? And I think as well, we also past pace it. And that is we're in the space of replaying every scenario that happened, looking for, what could I have done differently? Now, I think that there's always something to be learned from what we've experienced, but that wasn't the lens I was living in. And when you're in trauma, you're not looking back going, oh, what could I do differently? It's like, who was at fault, and how do I stop this from happening?
And how can I ensure that I'm not the one bringing the fault? Or I'm right?
Yep. No, 100%. And we had to actually get to the point where it was like, somebody would say, well, maybe you should do this differently. Maybe you should do that differently. And it's like, well, then go back and change it. Oh, right. You can't. Because I can't, like, I can't, I don't even have the energy to live in the present, let alone replaying all the past or stressing about the future. So when I say, I think it actually did have to come down to like a self-preservation at that time. What do I need in this moment? What do I need today? What do I need in order to make the next step? And that is something that I started to do, but also combined with really understanding the words intention, not goals. I actually started to really resent goals and putting big goals, because don't ask me where I was going to be at Christmas, or 5 years from now.
It takes you out of being present to some degree. It takes you away from the process. It takes you away from what you need to do or can do in the moment, right? Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't. I actually really resented that. Like people say, like, plan. I'm like, I can't plan. And when you're in the middle of that chaos, family would say, could you come for dinner like in 3 weeks? I'm like, I don't know. It's Friday. Let's just see what Saturday has. Like, that's literally what my world became, is one day at a time. So even though that mindset sounds negative, that I needed that. I needed
actually,
to go to that space. It actually was a blessing.
You know what's funny? Well, the thing I like about you probably most is that you're very fluid and you go by flow. And that's somebody who says, I'm not getting caught in the weeds of projecting into an outcome. So to some degree, you died to having any real desire for planning. Because what do they say? Like, for example, some people say, and you've probably read this before, but man makes plan, God laughs. Oh, it's like, oh, that's super sweet. That's so cute of you. I mean, that's cool. I'm glad you're intentional, but it's like, hey, how about you get like obsessed about the process, not get caught in the weeds on being attached to outcome, because it'll never, like you said earlier, it'll never 100% inevitable that it will never, ever, ever churn out exactly the way you thought. You thought you might have hair at this like this at this age, but it's 1/4 of an inch longer. It's not the same. So you have to be okay with death. It's not going to work out. the way you thought. You have to be okay with it. So I love what you said about future pacing it and then past pacing. And of course, listeners, when you feel that, where are we not when we're future and past? We're not in the present.
We
And
can't
so,
be.
right. And so exactly, you can't be in the present. It's not possible if you're in the future or in the past. And
Mm-mm.
so none of these are good or bad. The only thing is what's essential is we must first be present. Then we can maybe observe what we can play with, but we got to keep ourselves anchored to the middle. Now, here's what's interesting to the middle. Being present reveals much evidence of what is.
It's actually, you don't want to be there. Sometimes you don't want to be in that space because we don't
Because
want
evidence
to
is so rich, right? It's so much. It's like, how do I and so it's fascinating. I actually hear you saying, you said something. You said, I don't have the energy. This is what you said then. I don't have the energy to live in the present. And I wrote that down because at some point in time, I want to ask you if that would still be your answer, because here's the thing. And I want to not be insensitive to what happened in your life, but because you realize because of what happened, you're now here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you at some point in time when you journeyed through all of that and where you are today, and again, I'm empathizing, by the way, 100%. Listen, we all create, sometimes when we're going through transition, we don't know what's going on. We create a facade or something to help us cope with. Some people go to alcohol. Listen, at least they save their life. I don't care. Some people do other things. At least they don't kill themselves. And pardon this talk about that type of action, but you found a coping mechanism. So awesome. You found something. But when I think about being present, presence delivers so much evidence. And a lot of people, they choose not to act and not to be courageously, like what you said, your t-shirt, courageous, is contagious, right? Exactly. They choose, I wonder if not, they choose not to act because what action will do is it'll reveal evidence. And people would rather fantasize about who they are than the real evidence. So
I did not know I was going to be having such a philosophical conversation. I love it.
really, you didn't know this about me? Sorry.
Well, I did listen to an episode, but I love it. I love this thinking. So, okay.
Please.
So can you restate that last part of the question? Because my brain just went somewhere else.
Let me see how I. Okay, let's say it like this. You move from trying to eliminate the presence or the present moment to letting it serve you, meaning that it began to liberate you. So instead of eliminating, you began to utilize it.
Yes.
So in the moment, I wonder if you don't have lots of challenges in your life. The only thing is, you've just matured since that. You don't need a coping mechanism the way you did then, and it's not a bad thing you did. So I think where I'm going with it. So sorry. You got it. I'm going to be quiet now. Sorry.
Oh no, you don't apologize. You don't apologize. Yeah, you know what? It's funny because even if I think about now, like even this week, we've had a few major challenges come up. And it's the kind that sometimes want to take me out. And I look at it and go, okay, what's my next step? What's my next step? And one of the most valuable things that I learned in that, and I can just picture this balancing, whether you're surfing, whichever way you want to look at it, you're trying to get ground, but you've got like life is happening. Like you're just constantly dodging so many things. It came down to like, how can I listen to what I need? How can I respond differently? How can I show up differently? One of the things that I know we had a conversation before when you were on my show is like in those early years, I listened to Tony Robbins in my headphone. I did because for me, he helped me to change my state, which allowed me to respond differently. It didn't change. This is the big thing.
That's right. You keep the facts.
My circumstances.
You keep the facts intact, because if you change the facts, you are in the weeds. Now you're doing Enron stuff. It's not helpful.
Yeah, and it did not change my circumstances. It didn't change the story. But eventually the story changed because I was responding differently to it.
Your behaviors create your outcomes.
Yeah, it's a really hard, and listen, I mean, I'm not sugarcoating this situation at all. This was traumatic. It was chaotic. It was, there are times my husband will say something and we'll look at each other and we're like, wait, we lived in that, right? Like that was real, right? Was that real? And we actually have to stop because it's so unreal to be able to
Mm,
explain what it
mhm,
was.
mhm, mhm,
So it didn't change the circumstances, but we have to choose how we respond. We get to choose how we respond. And I recognize that my entire life, I would say, was about reaction. Like I was a fighter. I could react to
Doesn't it
everything.
feel, okay, this is a question. Doesn't it feel incredible that you've got to lived in two different bodies
Yeah.
totally? Isn't that
Yeah.
like, think about the gift. Like, oh my goodness, I was once like this, not good or bad. I once saw the world like this, but I live a totally, like, I came back as a different person. Like,
I
what
do. I
happened?
am. I
And then,
100%. And I have people who like the thing is that my circle literally I had to burn it. I had to burn it down because that was self-preservation.
mhm,
Like that was
mhm,
self-preservation. And
mhm,
I just want to any listeners to be in a
mhm.
space
Please. Yeah.
like you can, it becomes very important that when you are such a low state and you
Mhm,
have
mhm,
chaos
mhm,
surrounding you,
mhm,
the only things you can do are be
mhm,
aware of like who has access to you, what you're surrounding yourself with, what you're listening to,
mhm,
how you're taking care of yourself. And I would start to feel a little bit better, and then I would have somebody come over unannounced and say something that was totally inappropriate that would knock me out again. So it's
mhm,
like,
mhm,
nope, more boundaries,
mhm,
more boundaries. And I started to set criteria for what my inner circle was and
mhm,
what that looked like.
mhm,
And I got to a space that I'm not ashamed to say it. Like it was an invite only space.
mhm,
You didn't get access because
mhm,
because you're a family. You just don't. It's just not. That's how
mhm.
critical I treated that space, because that space was the only thing that allowed me to make one more day.
Well, think
Is
about think about what happened. You realized it's like you're using your motherly or the parently or whatever, you don't just say the mom or the dad, but you're using this inner wisdom. And it's like, the way I'd like to put it, perhaps it's like, and I have this little saying that I use for myself, and that is increase the signal to noise ratio. You dial up the
Mhm.
signal. And it's like when I went through my burnout years ago,
Mhm.
my wife, it was like circle the chariots.
Mhm.
And you know what? Here's the thing. Why is it so threatening to say, I need to get my bearings while all this is moving? Like, I just interviewed a gentleman, Wes Woodhouse, and he's a F-15 fighter pilot,
Wow.
rich interview. And what's fascinating is he talks about, in sport, there's a moving object, a soccer ball, and hockey, a puck, in football, a football. And when you're in the air, and I'm going to botch this, but it's like, how do you gain the courage to act, and to not from a place of fear or hypervigilance, but how can you be deeply present with a bunch of moving objects around you? So see, we say we want more life, and more life means more moving things. And when
Mhm.
more moving things are moving around us at halftime show in our life, typically we're like, wait a minute, whoa, 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 I cannot manage this anymore. I could for a while, but now it's impossible. There's a situation. That's what happens. That's the initiation stage, where it's like, this isn't possible for me to operate under my old pretense anymore. And now I get to decide, am I going to say I'm such an idiot? Or am I going to realize, no, I did that for a helpful purpose. I
Mhm.
did it for a reason, and it served something. And now I go along here, and it's like, actually, more moving pieces don't threaten how I show up. There's something that I said, to tie back into what we were talking about here a little bit. I said behaviors create outcomes, and I want to be very careful the way I say that, because I think what we're hearing from you, and I'm with you on this, listeners, we are not saying that when we personally adjust our behaviors that it will create the outcome. We're manifesting that in the other. We're saying exactly
Totally.
what you're doing. You're nodding. You are the one nodding, because what you're saying is, my behaviors will change the state that I get to show up in naturally. That's what
Yes.
I think we're saying.
Yes.
We're not saying it'll change a situation. If there's teen substance abuse, if there's other things going on, my behaviors won't change that person. That's called ultimate control of the other. That's slavery.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
What we're saying is, we're owning what we want to have control over. So it's, in my opinion, it's all a setup. The whole play of life is a setup for us to come back to the voice that we are, and to remind us that we arrived when we were born. We're not waiting for an arrival time. If
Mhm.
we think that we're needing to check boxes so that we can say that we are a good mom, we are a good human, if we do all these things and fix all these things, it's like, no, the arrival came when you were born.
You're just coming back to more of who you are,
You're coming
and
home, right?
trusting. Yes, and trusting. Yeah, there's so much that you said there that I think is, it's just, it's really powerful. It's work that, as I often say, it's work you have to live. You can't read it in a book. You actually, it's
Oh, that's so
living
good.
it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't read it in a book. It's so many people will come and say, all right, I really want to share a story, but I want to share all of my lessons. And I'm like, beautiful. Okay, what's the story? And they're like, hey, I don't want to share that. I don't want to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you live it? Like, because here's the thing, it's we learn our best lessons by living, right?
Mm-hmm.
Books
Mm-hmm.
amplify
Mm-hmm.
us, like
Mm-hmm.
podcasts amplify us, they help us with our learning. But it's literally what we're being challenged with walking through every single day that is helping us to become an expert in our own life, not over
Mm-hmm.
other people. And we all have that. We're all walking through something. And I think that that's a tough thing for people to like. Challenges are part of life. The path going off path is part of life. Starting to ask a different question allows your subconscious to open up to what is possible. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when I was in the thick of it and people would say, "Oh, this is happening for you." Okay, don't say that to somebody who's in the
Yeah,
middle
you
of
know what?
chaos.
No,
Like, what a
that doesn't help.
horrible thing to
No.
say.
Mm-mm.
It is not the thing to say when they're in that space. I actually wish, this comes back to an empathy piece. I think that like some of the people who affected my life the most in the most positive way, I don't even know how I've got through that time
Mm-hmm.
without them. I had to allow myself to be open to be vulnerable, to receive, to ask for support. I had to allow myself to receive it. They also were the people who allowed, just held space. They weren't here like saying, in a criticism,
Uh,
judgment, opinions.
yeah, what does that mean for you? Just talk to the listeners because we all know people that are going through a space. We don't know how to respond or what to do. Like what was most helpful?
You know why? And that is such a great question. That because I think that humans, again, we want to fix things, right? We want to
Mhm.
go in and say the right words. There's no right words you can say. When
Right.
somebody's in
No.
trauma, just actually just let that whole
Mhm.
expectation go,
Mhm.
because there's no words that you can say.
They're an overload. It doesn't matter what you give them to process. It's overload.
It's gone. They're
Yeah.
not even going to receive it.
No.
And for you to say, I know people mean well with this, but it's like, let me know if you need help. Okay. Like, I needed help with everything. I don't even know what to ask for. Like, I don't, it's just it might feel helpful, but it's, again, we're overloaded. So when you have a person who's going through a loss, and that's literally what I was doing, was going through a major loss at that time, that I couldn't even think straight to make it through the day. So some of my closest friends would literally show up and say, "Do you want to go for a walk?" Okay. Do you want, okay. Here's some food. Here's something. I dropped something off. How can I support you today? And they would walk up and show up. Like, but they were my closest friends. Now so I was okay with them coming through the door. But it's holding space for somebody. And when you hold space for somebody, I want to say this as an example right now. If I want to hold space for you, it's not about me.
Mhm.
It's not about me. Like,
Mhm.
it's not about, oh, I hope I say the right thing. I hope I do the right thing. I hope that, like, I can say the thing that's going to make them feel better. It's like, I'm here to hold space today. Like,
Do I find myself in the other?
and
Like if you
this is you nailed that. Like, can you see yourself in that other person, and how can you hold space for them? And I
Mhm.
think to this day, the people that I am so grateful for literally
Mhm.
held space for me.
So interesting when you say holding space and then to the thought of like the most beneficial state is being inside of another person. But
Mhm.
I think the other challenging piece is when you're inside of the other person, don't think that you know what's going on.
No,
So that's a big slippery slope because here's the thing, you're inside, that's as close as you get, but here's the thing. So what? You think that you have it figured out when they don't have it figured out themselves and they live in their body. Hello, anybody home in there? Like, think this through. That's not too smart. So it seems like your friends were very smart. They're like, listen, we're gonna just give you some options and you can say yes or no. So it was well timed
Mhm.
and it was it allowed them to be wrong. They say, can we do this? You say, no, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense to you.
No, it makes total sense. And I also want to say that, there was a time when I literally had to burn it all. Like, so some of the people that came into my life afterwards, when I look at who's in my life now, like there's only a couple people who were here then. The rest are all brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, incredible people are everywhere. Like, can you be open to receiving?
Mm-hmm.
I had to allow myself to receive support from others. That's really hard when you're trying to like put that armor up, be strong, like do all the things.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to allow myself to do that. And I think that also requires you being so clear on your boundaries to say,
Mm-hmm.
no, that's not okay. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually had a number of conversations with family members who meant well, let's just say meant well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I created this in my head. This helped me in this time. And it was simple that, are you volunteering to come and live in my house for a week so I could go somewhere and, oh, you're not, then I'm not interested. I'm not interested. I
I,
don't have the bandwidth for
yeah.
your
Oh
emotions.
my goodness. You know what
I don't
comes to,
have the bandwidth for that right now.
you know
And
what?
that's a
Mhm.
powerful thing to do.
You know what? That is magical because when I think about what love truly is,
Mhm.
it's give and receive at the exact same time.
Mhm.
But when you can sense that people are actually being takers
Mhm.
by just saying the right thing,
Mhm.
but not actually wanting to follow through with it, it's like, you know what? Once you give a shit, call me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And if you don't, that's okay too. So
That's right. And you're not, I love it. You're not holding them hostage. That's beautiful. You're saying, listen, you, each to their own. But
no.
I'm just saying, in this moment and time of the chaos of my life, it makes total sense. There's already enough stuff moving. You're trying to find your balance and your equilibrium in all of it, like your vertigo,
Yeah.
whatever's going on in life.
Yeah.
And you're going, actually, you're adding more unhelpful noise to the signal that I'm trying to raise. So actually, for the love of all things good, I need to build a relationship with myself, which is give and receive. It's like your heart. You got a valve at the top, valve at the bottom, many
Yeah, I
valves in
love
between.
that.
But if you don't, I think I taught some on your show, but if you don't let the blood flow straight through, if you close one valve and it's just giving or just receiving, if it's not instant at the same time, it blows up, nothing happens. So you got to take
Mhm.
care of yourself. That's the
Mhm.
most loving thing you could do. Really, what you did is you just defined to them, if you want to have an authentic relationship, I'm more than open. But if you don't want to, I actually just don't have bandwidth to do it. Sorry, I can't. My brain, and I know that space because I was there like you were. I went for walks. I was like out of it, like seriously out of it. Like
Oh,
it was
I was
so
out of
much.
it.
It's like gone. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, you nailed it. And I hope that that can land for people because yes, you have to do things to take care of you and you have to put those boundaries in place when there are people who are not in that space. And I'll just give a really quick example because it was very real at the time. As somebody came to my door, people felt it very comfortable to come to our door and let us know their opinions. I didn't have to think and wonder what they were thinking. They were very clear to come to my door and tell me.
Mm.
And somebody said, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? I'm like, I've done all those things. You know me. Like, I've been fighting this for years. This is what I've done. And as she started to cry, I'm like, why are you crying? And
Mm.
she was like, because you don't know how hard it is to be your friend. I don't know what I'm supposed to say to you. And I sat there
Oh,
and I
they
just
haven't
went,
lived it.
I sat there and
Oh.
went, I'm going to do you a favor. Okay. We're going to part ways because I don't have the bandwidth for this. I'm actually not angry at you, but I don't have the bandwidth for
It
this.
just doesn't matter.
It just doesn't matter anymore. And that was when I started to see, that I was actually responding and not reacting.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Good
a
job.
big difference in your personal power when you can learn how to respond to a really difficult situation and not react. As a counselor
Mm-hmm.
said to me
Mm-hmm.
once, you either throw gas or sand on every single argument you have, every single
Mm-hmm.
situation that happens. And I would go back to myself. I'm like, oh, no, sand, Marsha, throw sand, sand. You don't
Mm-hmm. You
need that.
found your voice. You found your
I
voice.
did. And so I want to share that as and I mean, did I ever have another conversation with that person? Not one
Mm-hmm.
since then. And I actually don't have any hard feelings. I actually don't, because I just learned that at the end of the day, I can't expect other people to know what to say or do when I lived in it and I didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have that feeling, but it actually starts to burn off and let go of people that I didn't need right then. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
need them.
Mm-hmm.
And that included family. I actually
Mm-hmm.
did have to separate from family for a number of
Mm-hmm.
months because
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
bandwidth for it. I just didn't.
You know what's interesting when it comes to bandwidth? So people come to the door. Happened to me too. I had some people who, like for you, they're just sitting with it. Like they weren't trying to solve anything. And so here's I think what we're trying to say. Tell me what you think. But what I'm hearing you say is when you're in liminal space, what you're realizing is what you once thought you could fix is no longer to be fixed. You
Yeah.
have to accept it. And so when somebody says, "Have you tried step 3, 4, and 5?" You're like, "Oh, wait a minute. What about this don't you get? Like I've been contemplating fixing it for how long? And thank you for giving me another tool. The only thing is, can you be okay with the anxiety that I feel that I don't know what's happening?" And
Mhm.
oftentimes people go, "We don't know how to deal with their own anxiety. So you're bringing me anxiousness." That's probably what's happening to your friend. She's going, "You're bringing me anxiousness because I can't control you to a finish line. Now
Mhm.
you're saying you want me to hold your anxiousness while I hold mine?" That's what sitting with it does. You hold someone's anxiousness while you hold your own and you bring
Mhm.
peace to it. And it's like, and that's where I think often if you haven't lived it, you don't know it. But I had some people who didn't go through stories like I went through. And I had this one guy, his name is Brendan. Brendan Neufeld. Brendan Neufeld just said to me, "Hey," and I didn't go out with friends at all. Like I checked out. Like I didn't go to family. I just checked. You know how it is. You know, bandwidth.
Yep.
I just checked out. And my wife and I, we were in this care group, so we saw each other every month, whatever. And of course, I stopped going to that. She started going again because it was nice, and I was glad she did. But Brendan was so kind. He was like a man's man kind of thing, but like he read it well. He'd never been through a story like mine. He frankly said, "I don't know what you're going through," which is a soothing balm to my soul.
Mhm.
Because even if he went through exactly what I went through, it's going to be a little different what I went through. So don't tell me that you know what I. That doesn't help,
That would be another thing I would say, don't say to others. Like,
right?
don't say that, because you don't project, like, I know
That
what
you
you're going
know.
through. You should do this. No, no,
So
no.
therefore, my message is qualified because I know what you went through. No, you've never
No,
lived in my skin, so you don't
no,
actually know. You kind of know. We have to be careful we don't make our problems too special. You know, but
no.
anyway, I get it. When bandwidth is low, but Brendan said this. Brendan said to me, "Hey Hepner," he goes, "we just want you to know whenever you want to talk, we're here for you." My friend Marsha, I'll tell you something. I barely saw that. I didn't see that guy once, but he reminded my wife every time she saw him. "Hey, just let Hepner know we're here for him whenever he wants." And honestly,
Wow.
he was a silent presence. I didn't let him come close to me. I didn't even let him in my room talk. I said, "No, no one." He
Mhm.
just kept on the same message. No big deal.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Right?
And that, like, that is, again, there's an example. Like, there's a male, people go, well, men don't get it. And I'm like, no, actually, they do. That was an incredibly powerful thing. That's holding space. He doesn't have an expectation tied to, I'm going to hold this space for you for a week. And then if you don't respond, then I'm on. He just unconditionally held it. I had like a really traumatic experiences where I had a friend just come to the door and go, I'm here for what you need, and she would
Mm-hmm.
come in and
Mm.
start with some not asking what I needed, but I'm here. So what can I do? What
It's
can I
like the
do?
Jewish people. They sit Shiva with somebody who passes away. And Shiva is when you're like, you're there and whatever the person needs, you'll just do. Make an egg, wash the toilet. For a whole week, they don't ask, they just do whatever you need, right? So
Yeah.
here's the question I have for you. How do you, so for listeners, you're probably listening, we all want to find our voice. Sometimes we go, do we have to go through a story? Do we have to live a traumatic experience? Sometimes we do. I'll just
Mhm.
say I was pretty stubborn, so I needed to have a
Same.
deepening, right? I don't know if you're the
Yep.
same, but yeah, you
Same.
sound like
Very
it
much so.
maybe.
Yep.
You sound like it.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't see you stubborn now. Don't, that's not the read I get from you. But what I'm
No.
saying is it's the ones that are kind of anchored down, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, no, I'm not doing different. This worked for me for my life, and I'm going to prove it to myself. Anyway,
Yep.
so here's the question. How do you find your voice by sharing a vulnerable story? And how do you, when sharing a vulnerable story, leave everyone in integrity? That's a
Yeah.
good one.
It's a great question. And that's like sums up all of the work that I get to do now. So I'm going to do my best to answer it in a way that people will be able to relate to. So finding your voice is where it starts. Like, and I mean, that can just be as simple as, do you journal? Do you write down? Can you leave voice notes for yourself? Can you,
Mm-hmm.
listen to what lights you up? What brings you joy? I mean, I remember somebody asked me, what brings you joy? And I'm like, joy. You just heard me tell my story, right? There's no joy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you can't selectively block emotions. I had to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to find room for things that I would like. So really your voice is going to come from who you are and sharing it and allowing it to shake, allowing it to not be perfect, allowing yourself to grow through that experience. Sharing a vulnerable story, using your voice and sharing a vulnerable story requires that you are vulnerable about yourself, not everyone else in the story, not the details of the story. Like I told you my story, but I didn't share a lot of details, nor will I ever, because I will share anything about my journey in the story.
There's a sacred circle. The chariot's circled. It's a sacred
Yep.
circle.
It is. It is 100%. And I think that's really important. So when it comes down to it, vulnerability is sharing my experience, my lessons, what I've learned, what I went through. And that's the piece of a story. If you're stuck in a loop of, but I have to tell you what everyone else did in order for you to understand my part in the story. No, you're still trying to prove something, and that's not going to fix, it's not going to do anything.
It's not beneficial.
Not beneficial to anyone. Actually, it's not. And it's like shifting out of when you're in that space, and I know it well, I don't judge it. I lived there for a long time. That's a victim space. That's a victim mentality. Zero change comes from that space. Just so you know, zero.
Yeah.
You will attract the same people.
I can
attract
agree.
the same experiences. You're going to stay in that space. So when people will come to me and say, I'm ready to share the story, and they start to tell, and I'm like, you're not yet. You're just not yet. You have to shift out of the victim mentality because that's not perspective. And I also like to equate that with being like stuck in your story. So when you're replaying all the scenarios, you're getting inside the story.
You're getting a bunch of connection from others. And so you think you're making a difference. Really, you're just connecting, and you're connecting with yourself. And so you really haven't come too far.
No. Right. So you have to move from inside that story. So that vulnerable piece allows. So vulnerability is allowing, you got to step through courage in order to do it. You have to allow yourself to be heard. You are vulnerable, hence the word, and you have to allow yourself to receive support. But that's the path to connection. That's the path to connection is allowing yourself to do that. So that's the vulnerable piece, learning to allow yourself to be vulnerable, allow yourself to be seen. And then when you shift from being in the story to on the story, I like to call it on the story. On the story is when you have perspective. I can look back at things. So when it comes down to it, like we want to shift to being like on our story, not in our story. And when we're on the story, we have perspective. We can see the lessons. We can see that we wouldn't be the person that we are today without these lessons. And how could these experiences have been working for us? Like I see that, even though I would really not use those words with people when they're in the middle of trauma. And so that's a piece of it. And then how do you share it? Like, what do you do? And leave others in integrity. I'm going to take it back to, I attribute a lot of these learnings early on, and I've adapted them to my own I heard Lisa Nichols speak in 2015. And when I heard her speak, she said, if you feel called to share a story, because it gives you purpose. And this is like, I was looking for some kind of purpose in all this craziness. If it gives you that feeling of purpose, if you're feeling called to share a story, then it's understanding, like, what are you meant to share? Like, what are you meant to share? And again, as I said, there's majority of my life, I'm never going to share it. It has nothing to do. It's not going to serve a purpose, right? It's not going to serve a higher purpose.
Yeah. When you do. Yeah, when you share your story, it's when you've healed from it and you've allowed it to serve you. And it's like your pain of the story serves a helpful purpose, and it doesn't draw it back to look at the incredible that I went through. It's not that. It's sharing, right? It's sharing the pieces of the story that would best benefit. I like to look at it like this. Tell me what you think. It's once we've done the healing part of it and we've included that story in or that part of our life into our story, then when we share with another, then we're listening to who they are as people. And we're just sharing the pieces of our story that we believe might benefit them. We don't know because we're not in them, but you're right. And so that's, and sorry for, I don't want to take you off your track, right? But yeah. Right. So it's like,
100%.
You want your pain to serve a purpose. And the only way that it can serve a purpose is if you share your story in the right way at the right time. It has to be done that way.
Yes. And it takes work to do this. And you're not going to get it right in the beginning. You're not. It's like, as I didn't. There are things I look back and go, I would have done that differently, but I did do the best. We have to learn through messy action. We do learn.
Mm-hmm.
But I always was very mindful of
Mm-hmm.
keeping their story. Like, their story is their story. They can
Mm-hmm.
share their story or not share their story. And it was important for me because, again, a lot of people didn't necessarily agree with me sharing the story. And so I was always very cognizant of, leaving them in full integrity and that piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
So how can I share the story means, like, what are the lessons that I learned? What did I come through? What can benefit and support others?
Mm-hmm.
And can you share it? This was her second question. Can you share it with the people in the room?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
if you're trying to share part of the story,
Share
could
it
you
not from a
share it?
share it not from a place of woundedness. You have to share from a
Yeah.
what's happening in the room, right? Mm-hmm.
Yep. So if they were in the room,
Mm-hmm.
would you be okay with sharing what you're sharing? If not, then check yourself. You're probably sharing things that don't need to be shared. And can I control how they're going to take it? No, absolutely not. And again, most people didn't understand what I was doing. I was following a gut pull of
Mm-hmm.
start the podcast, write the book, do the things, share the story, when majority of my circle was saying, like, have you lost your mind? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we don't do this. I was like, I think I'm supposed to. I think I'm supposed to. This is part of my healing. This is part of what I'm meant to do. This gives me purpose. And so, can you be willing to follow that calling when very few people agree with it? And it literally took my husband's the very first talk I gave. He came to it and he watched. And when I was done, he said, now I know what you're doing. And
Brilliant. Yeah,
I understand.
you're not doing it to draw attention back to yourself. You're
No,
saying this has to serve a greater purpose because it almost
yes.
the life killed me. So this is bigger than me. This is I find that for some reason, right, it's bigger than me. I got to play in that space now.
So that's exactly what you just said. It gave me life to feel like, what do you mean I could do something good with this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can take the worst experience in my life and I can do something good with it. That gave me hope. It also, I thought back to, I had a counselor at the time and I was like, no matter where I go, nobody is talking about these issues and they affect so many people who look just like me. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, maybe that's because you're supposed to. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, that's crazy. But I
Because you
went,
had the awareness, that's right. And then maybe you're supposed to.
maybe it is me. Maybe I'm supposed to do this.
You're
And
like, no,
so we
please
have to,
not.
right? We have to follow that. And so really sharing that story is like, how can you share with perspective? How can you share as if the people you're speaking about are in the same room? How can you hold yourself and still stand in integrity so that your purpose serves a much higher mission? And how can you, like, it's like getting out of your own head. That gave me fuel to understand that, wait, okay, I could do something good with this. And it's not about me anymore. And that it actually allowed me to share, which allowed me to receive messages from people, which allowed me to heal, which fueled me, which allowed me to keep going. And so it was such cyclical, beautiful work in the beginning. It still is to this day. That's where it came from. So really the vulnerability
Uh,
piece, if you feel called, this is what I'll leave this with. If you feel called to share a story, this is the work that I know I am here to do,
mm,
is help people to learn how to share vulnerable stories. But if you're listening to this and say, that girl's crazy, and there's no way I'm going to stand up and share the most difficult
mm,
times of my life, you don't have to. But what I do encourage you to ask yourself is it holding you back from living the life that you're meant to?
that's a good. Are you going to do the work that has you realize I could stay where I'm at? The only thing
Mhm.
is, if I don't move to the next thing,
Mhm.
I might be losing more than I think I'm gaining by staying in the old way.
I
Look at
think you
you,
almost always are. I think you
right?
almost always are. I think you
Right?
are. Yeah. And so you
100%.
don't have to stand on a stage or write a
Right.
book. But if your story is holding on to so much shame that it is keeping you
Mm-hmm.
stuck in your life, then you're not serving yourself and you're not serving your immediate circle and you're not serving the people that you're meant to impact. And I 100% believe that the people that I have been able to impact and who have impacted my life, I didn't know who they were at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking around your family and going, no, no one's going to hear me. It's not them. It's actually not them.
What's
It's
interesting is that, at the first level of connection lies empathizing with someone's pains and problems. That's the first level. And
Mhm.
until we do that properly, We can't move to the next thing, which is empathizing with opportunities. Pain is a connector. We all feel it. To the exact
Mhm.
degree you can handle pain is how what you can handle deeper joy. We know this. Everybody
Yes.
wants a life. The only thing is a utopia doesn't work, because utopia means I want all the good without going through a tension rich environment. What makes life?
Right.
Tension rich environment. Gosh, look at you, Marsha. I sit here and I just watch you go and I look at what life has created out of you. A
It's
courageous, a courageous woman, and it's contagious.
Oh,
It's
see, I
true.
knew this morning. I actually went and go, I think I'm supposed to wear this shirt today.
There you
He's
go.
gonna love this.
There
And
you
it
go.
felt good to me to wear
Right.
that. I love, like, listen, I love words, clothing with words, things with
Mm-hmm.
words. And
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, I wore the Serenity prayer on my wrist. I
Oh,
kid you not, I probably read it every 10 seconds. I would
oh.
stop and go like, okay, courage to accept the things I cannot change. Okay, courage. And it was just, so for me, I like reminders in my face. I like words around me that
Mm-hmm.
helps me, especially when I was in challenging spaces.
Mm-hmm.
But as it continued to evolve, like, I look at it now and I kept saying, like, I know I'm supposed to do this. I know I'm supposed to do this. I have no idea. I still don't know what it's going to look like, because it keeps evolving and changing.
Mm-hmm.
But it has led me down the path to sharing and being a part of things that they're like, if they're part of my legacy, then
Mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful
Mm-hmm.
that this is the work that I get to do. And it's freeing. It is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely freeing. If you're holding on to those shame stories and they're keeping you stuck in your life, learning to live this way. I mean, the only person who's judging you is yourself anyways.
Well, we feel from you that freedom we feel, and what we're hearing is you get to feel freedom when you go through, not just in spite of the story, but because of. You
Because of.
get to experience it and you get to move through. Gosh, we've learned so much from you today. Thanks so much for all of what you've done. What comes to heart for me is when I observe you and I think to myself, there's a human being who always wanted to be a giver. We hear this in your first part of your journey. You wanted to be a giver. That was who you were as a mom. You wanted to be a giver. To be a
Mhm.
beneficial human, I think to be a giver is a good thing. Servanthood. People talk about Jesus or Muhammad or Adam, Buddha. It doesn't matter. What I'm thinking is we know a good life is when we choose to not just bring it to ourselves, but towards others.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, though, what we're not maybe thinking about is we have a relationship so we have giver and taker. We don't want to be a taker. So therefore, sometimes we associate the taker with receiver. And that's not what a receiver is, because unless you receive, the masculine is often the doer and the giver.
Mhm.
The feminine, which by the way, a man has feminine because the nurturer, the inner voice, that's the feminine, leads the
100%.
external. And so
Mhm.
here's the thing: if you don't build a relationship with the receiver, if you don't, it's like your heart valve being shut on one side again, it's going to explode. And the other side is this: if you don't build it, you become a taker,
Mhm.
because you think you're giving, but you're giving because you're hoping you can just finally get something back, and then we run out of gas, and this is where burnout happens. All this stuff you're experiencing, your journey. I don't need to add anything. I was just trying to come around. Like I can see you built a relationship with receiving, and receiving isn't taking.
No,
Receiving
it's
is right, because unless there's a give and receive at the exact same time, love doesn't complete. It's not true love. Then
no.
what it is, if it's not true love, it's actually. So anyway, there's so many good things. I got a quick question to ask you, before I let you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So earlier you said in that part of the journey, which I respect, when stuff was happening and really it was so chaotic in your world and you needed a coping mechanism. Awesome. You said, I didn't have the energy to live in the present.
Mhm.
What would you say that is today? Do you have the energy? If you look at the evidence of your life, what's the proof of? No hyperbole, but what's the proof of? Do you choose the energy, or is there something that you now have the energy to live in the present? Or what is it and how so? Just real quick.
That's a great question. I'm just going to follow my gut. I think that I live primarily in the present majority of the time now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the energy that I have to live now comes from I've built a relationship with myself, asking, like, what do I need? What do I need? What do
Mm.
I need today? What do I need today?
Oh.
It changes every single day. Listen, it changes every single day. I go internal. I know that movement is something that supports me every day. I know that sleep supports me. I know that my gallon water jug supports me. So I surround myself
Mm-hmm.
with the things that support me every single day. And I give back in ways that I never did before. And if my life is not unfolding in the way that if I'm not responding in the way that I want to, I often stop and go, what am I not doing that I need right now? So it's not judging that I didn't do it as well as I did yesterday. It's like listening to what I need
Mm-hmm.
and honoring that. And that is something I never did in my life before. I guarantee I was the person who did, Monday, Wednesday, Friday was the weight workout. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday was the cardio. Like that is literally what my life was. And I just was so out of touch. I was like trying to do exactly what I was supposed to. And now I think that I can live so much more in the present because I do slow down. I do listen. I do honor what I need. And that allows me to keep showing up in the way that I feel can serve myself
Mm-hmm.
and others better. Do I knock it out of the park every day? God, no. Like, God,
Mm-hmm.
no, not even close.
Mm-hmm.
But tune in on a daily basis, tune in the present,
Mm-hmm.
and give yourself what you need that day.
You know what? I'm going to leave it at this. We go on forever, but I'm just going to say like this. You can end the show because I want to ask you where people can find you in a bit. But here's the thing. Gosh, you know what? Oftentimes I ask myself, and when I was in my other life, let's say it like this, or when things were rough, listeners, take this in. We say we want to hear, we say we want to listen to what's happening. We say we want to see clearly what's there. But listening can be difficult because what's going to happen when you listen, you're going to wake up to something called, what is it that I really need right now? We're going to hear this voice. What do I need? And if we're not careful, we lean into societal conditioning. Need? I don't need anything. I'm good. I'm a self-made man. Look at me. I got it figured out.
Yes.
And so you nicely came home to a place of going, when it all comes down to it, the friend knocked on the door and says, and she spins it on you. Of course, this example, you're making it difficult to be a friend to you. And you're like, honestly, I need something. You can't give something. So the resounding truth came. I am a person who has needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I will not deny it. So sometimes being a listener to what's happening reveals the truth of who we are. And the beauty is needing has, if you're a person who has needs, that means somebody gets to connect with you. And that means we're all serving each other's purpose. So it's like a beautiful example and great place. So thank you so much for that share. I love it so much. Where can people find you? Yeah, you made my heart tick a little bit faster there. It was nice. When you were talking, I could barely sit still.
I
I'm like, okay,
know.
this is like so much going on.
And again, I love being on this end of it. So thank you so much for having me. If you go to Google, Instagram, Facebook, anything, and start typing Marsha Van W, it will come up as me. I like pretty much your first top 10 choices, which is why because my name is so long, we just keep it simple.
Yeah.
Marsha Van W. And my podcast is Own Your Choices, Own Your Life, which is really, I mean, that's my baby. That is my, I love that because the stories that are on there and people who share, like if you ever want to feel like, how can I find my way through a story? There's almost 450 episodes of people sharing their expertise, their experience with you. So that is where I spend a big majority of my time is on that podcast as well.
So listeners, I want you to know something. She doesn't just take anybody on the podcast. She makes people, she vets people and curates people like I do. She takes her audience quite seriously. And so she gets about the deep work. So I'm surprised you weren't thinking that it was going to be such a deep conversation because this is what I do. But you delivered. So you were good. You checked the boxes. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank
seriously.
you for honestly helping me to bring a different piece of it forward to support your listeners.
It was an absolute honor. It was so much fun. Thanks for playing full out on the show. And we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
With inflation rates rising, interest rates shooting up, gas prices skyrocketing, and the continued global unrest, it's easy to find what's wrong in the world. Tony Robbins says, what's wrong in the world is always available, but so is what's right. Instead of trying to hope and wish the world into a better place, it's time to make the most important decision any of us can ever make, and that is to invest in yourself. Now, you already know that I've always stood with you as you've navigated the uncertainties of life's reality. However, It's now high time that I step up and take decisive action to walk alongside your current life journey by making myself available to you in a radically new way during these challenging times. For a limited time, I'm inviting you to a 45-minute strategic business life consultation at no charge and no strings attached. This consultation is where you'll regain the reins of your life. It's where you'll gain clarity on exactly why you're stuck, moving you directly towards your optimal outcomes. I'm humbled to say, however, my clients' generous reflection of their time spent with me reveals the truth. The skills they've been able to master in a short period of time by engaging in our one-on-one strategic sessions have changed their lives in so many ways. This is the only invitation that I can fathom that will put my skin in the game of your life in such a way that will allow us to address your specific needs with precision and excellence. 45 minutes, just you and I, together on a call to get you headed in the direction you crave most. Here's what my clients report after our one-on-one sessions. A decrease in indecision, an increase in clarity, confidence, and courage, an increase in fully being able to capitalize on what's directly in front of them, an increase in impact at work, on their families, and on their communities, a decrease in pain and suffering, and a decrease in anxiety. So, if you want to move beyond old stories, get clear on where you're headed so that you can shake your world, then here's a rich opportunity for you today. Simply go to www.jameshepner.com and stay on the page for about 45 seconds or so, and you'll see a little pop-up appear that will allow you to book in your business life consultation with me. This offer will expire and fill up. Maximizing this opportunity will set you up to reclaim and regain any of your inner power that has slowly been drawn down over these challenging times. And remember, if you want to stop the self-sabotage, raise your standards, and participate with unshakable confidence, you'll want to take the Maximize Your Life quiz found at www.jameshepner.com/quiz right now. My sincere hope is that you've gleaned a few nuggets for yourself and a few pieces of interest that help you move forward in your unique journey. So again, I thank you for joining me here. This is James Hepner clocking out. Until next time, peace out, rock up.